What did I say?
Both of all of our speakers this evening, but I'd now like to introduce our two speakers from community mental health affiliates that are with us tonight. We have Mr. Chris Marino. I'm going to read his bio first. Chris is the Assistant Vice President of Child Programs at Community Mental Health Affiliates, or CMHA, where he oversees outpatient and intensive treatment programs and school-based services. For the past 11 years, Chris has been trained in and provided over 7 trauma-focused evidence-based practices to children and families affected by traumatic events. He has given numerous trainings and workshops to other community partners and school districts on topics such as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, behavior management, compassion, fatigue, and self-care, and social emotional learning. And with Chris tonight is Jessica Sestero. Jessica is a licensed professional counselor currently working as the clinical director of young adult services at CMHA. Jess has extensive clinical experience providing direct care and supervisory oversight of the mental health treatment of children, young adults, and adults. Prior to her current role at CMHA, Jess served as the pediatric mental health consultant for the Yale Child Study Center and is a certified trauma treatment provider through the Department of Veterans Affairs. So thank you and welcome to Jess and Chris.
All right. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Thank you, Plainville schools, families, community for having me, and Jess from CMHA. Thank you, all of you who are joining remotely. I know we let off by talking about how important mental health is. And whenever I do these types of workshops, professional development, I mean, whether it's caregivers or students, teachers, social workers, I like to lead off with talking about something that I feel is really important. And it's making sure that you all know what our goal is and our responsibilities are when giving these types of discussions. Our goal here is to make sure that we are talking about what matters to you. You all, the caregivers in the room, filled out a survey on what was important. Some really great questions and thoughts. And we want to make sure that we are talking about things that are meaningful to you. So we will do that tonight. And our responsibilities remain to you throughout this entire evening. So at any point throughout our conversations, if you have a question, a thought, some feedback, anything at all, please feel free to stand up, raise a hand. We'd love to hear from you because we are here for you. And when we talk about things like mental health awareness, some of the topics may be sensitive. And some of the things may lead to conversations that normally we are avoidant about. And I think tonight we fight through some of that stigma to say tonight we have courageous conversations about things that are really meaningful and important for the school district and for this community and for the parents and caregivers in the room. So to get things started off, I'm going to pass it to Jess, and she's going to lead us into conversations around some of the things that you had asked for specifically through the survey. Thanks.
Hi there. So there's not too much information that I have with me tonight that I'm going to be presenting that's groundbreaking. Really, the goal today is to keep things pretty simple. So I'm going to be explaining some things in relatively simple terms, and just wanted to put a disclaimer out there that some of the topics and words that I'm going to be using tonight are going to be simple yet informative. And so if there are any children in the room, it might be a good opportunity for you to take a little bit of space. And once I'm done, then Chris will take over, and it probably will be a good time for them to come back. So I did want to start off by saying that adolescence in and of itself is a period of tumultuous change as it is. There's a normal range of development that can manifest itself as moodiness, irritability, pushing away from parents and caregivers. It's a natural part of the development process. What should be concerning is if you notice indications of hopelessness, worthlessness, a significant withdrawal from friends and activities, or suicidal thinking and behavior. These are not typical manifestations of teenage angst. So I'm going to be giving you some of the warning signs of suicide, which also double as symptoms of depression. So just so that we can kind of have an overview as to what some of the traditional warning signs are. Talking or writing about death or feeling trapped with no way out, making statements of, I want to kill myself or I'm going to commit suicide. Giving verbal hints such as, I won't be a problem any longer. If anything happens to me, I want you to know. Feelings of hopelessness and withdrawing from family, friends, and the community. Increased drug and alcohol use. Giving away personal possessions and throwing away important belongings for no clear definitive reasons. Unnecessary risk-taking and dangerous behaviors. Regularly self-harming. Significant changes in mood. Significant changes in eating and sleeping habits. Loss of interest in usual activities. Acting out behaviors and running away. Neglecting one's personal appearance. More physical complaints are often linked also to emotional distress. So significant issues related to complaining of stomachache, headaches, and extreme tiredness and fatigue. Loss of interest in school or schoolwork, lack of response to praise, and writing about suicide or writing suicide notes. And again, like I said, some of the symptoms and lists that I just indicated are also doubling as depression symptoms, but also teenage angst. So how do we know the difference? And the difference comes from you. You know your child. Nobody knows your child better than you do. You know their usual patterns. You know their common reactions to frustrations and challenges. And you know what their good days and their bad days look like. So trust your instincts. If their behavior goes beyond this usual pattern of normal behaviors, that's when it's time to reach out. So there's this really groundbreaking development whenever a child struggles with something. So groundbreaking. You wouldn't even believe how groundbreaking it is. What do we do when we think a kid is struggling? We ask them. Crazy, right? We ask them. We have these open conversations with them. We ask them directly because there's a stigma associated with kids getting help. There's still a stigma that exists. So one of the things that we know is the more hopeless and helpless people feel, the more likely they are to choose to hurt themselves or potentially end their lives. It's important to talk about mental health and suicide. Do not wait for them to come to you. Ask what's wrong, if they're sad, if they're anxious, if their behaviors have deviated from a normal pattern of behaviors, ask them. Research actually does not show that talking about suicide will increase suicidal thoughts at all. It actually has been found to have the opposite effect. My recommendation and Chris's recommendation, if I could speak for Chris, because we've been doing this a long time, is to ask the right questions. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of taking your life? Do you have a plan? If the answer is yes, what do you do with that? You acknowledge their fears, you acknowledge their despair, you acknowledge their sadness. You provide reassurance, but what you don't do is dismiss it. Avoid asking why questions. Why sometimes can come across as being a very blaming question. And those of us that are in the field and that are here tonight will tell you that why usually get you a shoulder shrug answer. Instead, what's going on? But more importantly, how can I help? Some other tips that I can think of and that Chris and I had talked about a little bit earlier relate to paying attention, looking for creative ways to connect kids that are struggling with family members, caregivers, coaches, teammates, teachers. I'm not going to get too into this because I think this is probably a topic for another forum altogether. Monitoring and talking about social media use. So I'll kind of just table that for now. Social media can provide some modicum of valuable support for kids because it makes them feel connected. So the important thing that I'm trying to relate to you tonight is to do the best that you can to make those connections with your kids. If it's not with you and the child, it's eliciting the help of a caregiver, of a teacher, of a school administrator. One of the things that we are going to be providing you electronically and here tonight is a bunch of pamphlets. Way too many pamphlets, way too many magnets, way too many pens and stress balls that identify for you numbers and resources that you guys can utilize as school professionals, as administrators, as parents, and kids themselves. There are warm lines available that kids can call themselves if they're struggling and they just want to talk to someone. These warm lines are run by young adult program staff, young adult program members, kids that really have been through these kinds of issues in the past as well. We also have the 211 resources. Where just by dialing 211, we'll connect you with someone who can come out to your house and offer an in-person assessment if that was something that was needed. There's the National Suicide Hotline of 988 that you can call. Again, we're going to be broadcasting for you guys and sending links to everybody virtually, how you can access these resources. But I think the most important aspect that I wanted to touch upon is that child welfare and suicide prevention is a community responsibility. We're in this together, and it's not all on the parents' shoulders. It's not all on the school shoulders. It's not all on the community provider shoulders. We're in this together. So I think it's important that we lean on each other, that we reach out, and that we connect so that we can more comprehensively wrap these kids around and support each other. So to touch on the supporting each other bit, I'm going to tag Chris back in so that he can come and talk a little bit about how to care for the caregiver.
Good. Thank you, Jess. So I want to lead off by talking about responsibility again, because that's where Jess ended. I talked about the responsibilities we have at the very beginning. And it's interesting because when I talk to caregivers and helpers, regardless of profession, we talk about these things called misconceptions, but oftentimes drive our behaviors and our reactions and our emotions. And one of the most startling misconceptions that I talk about is this one that all helpers seem to have at the beginning, whether it's beginning raising a child, beginning becoming a therapist, teacher, social worker, and it's this misconception of I am responsible for the outcome. Raise your hand if you were a helper in the room, and that's regardless of profession. If you've ever held that misconception, and I'm going to talk about why it's a misconception in a minute, but has anyone ever held that I am responsible for the outcome of those I'm helping? It's the #1 misconception that's going to lead to fatigue and burnout very quickly if we're not careful. And so we want to reword it, we want to rephrase it to make it make more sense and relieve some burden. And it's I'm responsible for my intention. And my intention is to help unconditionally. And if we hold that to be true, language is really powerful. And imagine the weight that's lifted when you say to yourself, I'm responsible for my intention, not the outcome. Because we are saying otherwise that I am responsible for the outcome of another human being with free will. That is impossible. It is impossible to be responsible for that outcome. So we have to lift that. Sometimes we say to ourselves, I have the resources and the knowledge to be able to help others. And you hear this from parents a lot, going into raising a child or taking a child in and saying, I know what I'm doing. I know I can help them no matter what. I will always be there for them. And I know what I'm doing. I know I can do it. And this is where we have to break through some of that stigma of asking for help. It is okay if you realize one moment in time that you don't know how to help. Whether you're a teacher, a social worker, a grandparent, parent, whatever role you play in this room, it's okay to break through that stigma and say, I'm not okay. My child needs help. And I don't know how to help them in this moment. And that's why we have all of the pamphlets and magnets, chapsticks. You didn't mention chapsticks are really good. Fixing chapsticks. And that's why we talk about this. And there's this really interesting cycle of fatigue. And it's called compassion fatigue. Has anyone ever heard of that term before? Has anyone ever heard of the term compassion satisfaction before? They go hand in hand. Okay? There's this experience that we have as helpers. And by default, caregivers in the room are helpers, whether you want to assume that role or not. You are helpers and models at all times for those you're caring for. And compassion satisfaction is what occurs when you help and you get the outcome you desire. You see that person benefiting from your help. And when you do it again and again and again, it feels really good. Really good. We actually receive some internal benefit, not just like mentally and emotionally, but actually like biologically. We're releasing some really powerful hormones like oxytocin. Oxytocin is this hormone that's a love hormone. It gets released when we're like giving a hug. And believe it or not, it fights stress. It fights the stress hormone in the body. So biologically, we are programmed to feel better when we are helping than actually receiving help. And that's why therapists exist, right? It feels good to do what we do. But it doesn't always feel good to do what we do. As parents, caregivers, social workers, and teachers, it doesn't always feel good because we break through that misconception of I don't always get the outcome I wanted. The kids that I'm helping don't always get the outcome I wanted. So what do we do with that? We have to realize it and be aware of it, that we start in this very invested stage of the relationship of helping. And if we're not careful of recognizing our own symptoms of fatigue, we start to withdraw. We may even find ourselves getting angry, blaming, developing some guilt and shame internally that it's my fault that this happened. And then you start to become so overwhelmed that you don't know how to help and you don't want to help anyone. So we're here to provide some resources to help raise your awareness of that fatigue cycle. It's very important. And to make sure that caregivers are cared for, because we want you to take these resources and be able to help your kids, to help your community. The only way we can do that is if we help you guys first. Remember the whole like airplane analogy, everyone's heard that one, right? That was true. We have to take care of you guys because it's a community responsibility to help these kids. We all in it together. And it starts with us in the room. And as long as we're taking care of each other in the room, I think we're going to be okay. And our kids are going to be okay. So as long as we keep the conversations going, I think that's probably the most meaningful thing tonight. And I'd like to kind of open it up for some Q&A at this moment, if that's okay. So open to questions, thoughts, comments, and direct questions also about certain things. Very open to that as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are the mental health specific programs available to kids in town where they can take part in? Where are they and what are they? To what extent do they exist?
Yeah, so I think the school offers quite a bit here across the district, but also our agency is located right next door in the grid, and we offer a wide variety of mental health groups that are typically like art and play-based and therapeutic in sense to be able to work through symptoms of anxiety, depression, any type of social problem-solving issues. We can support those. And I know other mental health agencies like Wheeler and Klingberg, who also serve this area, provide very similar programs. So I know this, believe it or not, it is a very provider-rich area. It's just a matter of making sure that agencies like us get out here and talk about it to make sure that you're aware of those resources. I think that's important. And so we have a resource list on the table that has the contact info and location of some local places to receive mental health supports. You know, one of the things, and I know there were a lot of questions coming in, and I don't hear them now, so maybe we can kind of circle back and make sure I talk about it. And I know, again, there's some hesitation to maybe bring this stuff out, right, into the air. We talked about first normalizing some anxiety earlier. I think it's teenage angst, right? And a lot of times parents ask the question, caregivers ask, how do I know what's normal and not normal? Jess alluded to that already, of when it deviates out from what you know about your kid. And there's that idea of like, I know how to help my kid. We when kids come into our clinic for mental health services, we give a symptom rating scale to the child, and we give a symptom rating scale to the kid. Same exact scale, or to the parent, one to the parent, one to the kid. And they fill them out, not in front of each other. And then we compare. And it's really interesting. Top half of the symptoms are what we call externalizing things, fighting, arguing, things you can visually see And typically, the things that stress parents out the most. And then the bottom half of the scale is all this internalizing stuff, anxiety, depression, thoughts of not wanting to live, thoughts of having no friends, being alone, worrying something bad is gonna happen, all this internalizing stuff. And it's funny is that we see the kid minimize the externalizing stuff. The kid's like, I don't argue, I don't fight, I don't do that stuff. And the parents are like, you do it all the time when you're talking about it, it's so stressful. And then the bottom half is the kid is honest, sometimes, about the internalizing stuff. I'm anxious, I'm depressed, but I don't want to talk about it, but I'll start over here on this forum. And then the caregiver says that stuff is not present. That stuff doesn't happen. And maybe they're just hoping it doesn't, but they haven't asked. And the child hasn't told. And so there's this discrepancy. So we have this luxury as a provider in this moment to address the discrepancy. And I think that's where we encourage caregivers to ask that question. You don't have the luxury we do. You don't have scales at home. You're not giving your child a scale and saying, well, you're better to fill this out. I'm gonna fill one out here. It's typically not how you do things at home. We have that luxury, you don't. So that's why we ask caregivers to have these courageous conversations and ask the question. And that's how sometimes we unpack some of the stuff that kids carry with them is this anxiety and depression, and it comes out this way.
Chris, one of the questions we received was, when is it too early to ask that question? So I think they're referring to age-wise, is when is it appropriate to have that question, ask those questions?
It's a really good question. As a father of a soon-to-be 4-year-old, we ask these questions. I think it's just a matter of how you ask. Kids have dilemmas socially, emotionally, from a very young age. From a tantruming toddler to a tantruming high schooler, they have emotional distress. The reasons will change developmentally as they get older, but I never think it's too early. It's just a matter of how do you ask the question with language that makes sense for them, and for what they may or may not be going through. I hope that answers maybe the question, but there is no, in my opinion, too young of an age.
So could you talk a little bit about the intake process? For some families that may not have reached out for services before, what might they expect in the process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically the first encounter with us at least at CMHA is with a call center representative to just get some basic demographic information out of the way. So typically you do that first, and then you would get introduced to your therapist when you come for your scheduled appointment, or we have open access hours during the week where caregivers can actually walk in at any point during those hours and receive on the spot intakes. And that's for adults and children, because I know we got to take care of our adults as well. So we see a lot of parents at our clinic, and our clinic is a one-stop shop. We have a pharmacy on the first floor, adult services on the third, and child services on the fifth. So everything is directly in-house in one location. And so open access hours are available for both kids and families and adults, or they can call to schedule. And so when they come in for their intake appointment, they'll have some paperwork to fill out, just like we all do when we go to our doctor offices. And they'll usually spend about maybe an hour and a half talking with an intake therapist, getting some background, the reasons why they're there, and what they hope to accomplish in treatment. Yeah, that's enough, Jess.
Not that I want to take any questions, but I did want to just talk a little bit about one of the programs that I think I can probably provide some information about. One of our programs at Young Adult Services is called the CT Stay Strong program. So this program is designed for clients between the ages of 16 and 25. So this kind of fits the high school demographic a little bit better. So now what Chris said, with a client coming into our open access starts with a telephone call usually. Hey, I'm looking to set my son or daughter up for some treatment, for some services. You schedule an appointment, you come on in for an intake. Once you come in for your intake, if you're identified between the ages of 16 to 25 to maybe benefit from the CT Stay Strong program, you're automatically routed to myself and put on our wait list to get into our program. And what our program entails is you are linked with a clinician, you're linked with a family advocate, which primarily is a heavy lift for any type of case management services. That's navigating benefits, that's assisting with vocation educational stuff, that's mock job interviews. That's, you got some court stuff going on, so you're gonna need somebody to help navigate that territory. So any type of case management resources you can possibly think of, they help with daily life skills, how to do your laundry, how to budget, how to pay a bill, how do you get phone minutes? So these are kind of some of the basic life skills that our case manager would be working with the client on. And then the last component of that program would be a peer recovery specialist. The peer recovery specialist job on the CT Stay Strong team, which is assigned to each client. So these 3 folks are for each client. The peer recovery specialist has lived experience with mental health and or substance use issues. So this is the person that we hire to really link as more of a mentorship role with our clients. Now, this program is usually involved for 6 months up to 1 year. So what we'd like to do during this time, this 6 months to 1 year, is completely wrap them up with what's called wraparound supports, so that we can ensure that the client can navigate the different systems that are involved in the client's life and hopefully eventually transition them to a more outpatient level of care. CT Stay Strong program does not mean that mom or dad have to bring the child to the clinic for appointments. We pick kids up at school. We do use agency vehicles, so we can go see them at home. We can bring them to job interviews. We can get creative and go to the park. We take them to lake compounds on Friday activities. So it's a little bit more creative in that we're trying to reach young adults where young adults are at. So this program specifically, the same way you would get into this program would be by connecting with CMHA and or emailing me directly, which my email and my information is on the brochure itself. And really just starting the conversation, asking some questions. Hey, what's going on for this child? What do we think would be the most beneficial course of treatment? We have a conversation. We meet you, we meet your child, and we figure out what would be the best treatment modality for that child. So I just wanted to add that to kind of Chris's pitch on how to get somebody involved in treatment at CMHA. So you can go through, just calling the main number and going through an intake, and then eventually, if the client is between the ages of 16 to 25, they will think during, we have these weekly disposition meetings, hey, would CT Stay Strong or a young adult service program be appropriate for this client, given the client's needs and expectations? And from then, we would really filter folks into which service program makes the most sense for the client.
We have any more questions?
Any other questions in the group? Okay. So I think Vicky,
So we're gonna give Vicky Trzynski just 1 minute to get set up. If anybody wants to get up and pick up a water or some refreshments, feel free. And then as you do that, I'll just kind of quickly intro Vicky is our director of special services for Plainville Community Schools, and Vicky tonight is going to kind of give an overview of all of the in-district support and personnel, some of which are here with us this evening. And answer any questions you might have internally from the school district perspective. And I believe Chris and Jess will hang out for any other additional questions. Whenever you're ready, Vic.
Whatever our computer says. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us for this important topic tonight. As we know, Plainville Community Schools is not a primary mental health institution. However, we do service children and families. And so part of our mission in helping kids is to be able to ensure that they can participate in their school day. And we see a lot of kids who are really struggling with anxiety and concerns and depression and some behaviors. And so we really wanted to be able to share today the variety of staff and partnerships that the Plainville Schools participates in. So there are sort of 3 main categories of mental health service providers within school districts. The first one to talk about today is our school psychologists. School psychologists' primary role is to provide both evaluations and consultation for parents, for staff, and to support children, to help really look at instructional, social, emotional, behavioral interventions for students, right? So they're really sort of our diagnosticians in the district and can really help families to understand the learning profile of their children to help with understanding and building a strengths-based program. So what are the strengths of each child? And then what are the areas that they need some help in or some barriers, and how can we help address those problems? What you can see here is our school psychologist staff across the district. And they are available, typically they're as part of the school-based team. And so that would be our first group of staff. The second group are our school social workers. They really are our liaisons between home, school, and community service providers, and they help provide some of that coordination for families and schools and school staff and teachers. They also provide some solution-focused direct services, so counseling services, to help with social and emotional skill development. These ladies represent our school social workers within the district. And, you know, again, their role is, you might be the first point of contact if you were to call the district and say, I might need some help. So this is somebody that you would call, kind of explain what you're looking for, and they might help to guide you or connect you to other members of our team. The third major group are our school counselors. They are primarily housed in our secondary schools, so our middle school and high school have school counselors. And their role is really preventative care and intervention to support all of the students within the school community. And helping in areas such as career planning, academic planning, college and career readiness, looking at social, emotional, behavioral development, and then of course, transition plans between schools and into the adult world. Our school counselors also focus on some school-based problem solving to help that every student's needs are being met. Our school counselors are more likely to be the closest liaisons directly to our teachers at the secondary level. So they're the ones who might be meeting directly with the teachers. You may call them, ask a question. They may go out to the teachers, come back and gather information. And again, can also provide some school-based direct counseling services and interventions, typically more in a focused group. So typically some kind of anxiety management group or healthy life choices kind of groups. Those are the kinds of things that they would run. This is our middle school team. And this is our high school team. And then finally, we have one other person in our district who is our family liaison. This is a relatively new position. It is also some legislatively a new position for all school districts. And really what her role is to cooperatively work with students, adult families, school staff, and community partners for those more complex students. So when students need a significant amount of care coordination, or there are lots of agencies involved, our family liaison would help to kind of navigate the systems. We recognize that for many families, there are lots of different places to call and you're not sure where to go or what to do. Our family liaison can help with those more complex systems to help families get what they need. And our family liaison services are typically requested through our school administrators. So at that point, the principal of the school would say, you know what, we've tried a bunch of things in our school. We really need some additional support and some problem solving. Can you come and help us as a team to meet those students? We are also really excited to have a number of community-based partners. So the Plainville Youth Services is definitely an area that provides significant individual group counseling, assessment, substance abuse, both assessment and treatment, and really as a wonderful opportunity for families to get access to services. We're also working directly in our schools, again, primarily the middle school and high school. Cynthia Rivera, one of our therapists, is also partnered with the Connecticut Junior Republic to provide school-based mental health services that are insurance-based as well. But really the team is available for lots of different supports and services. And again, for many families who haven't had any experience, this is a great place to kind of get started and try to figure out where they would like to go. We've also been fortunate since 2020 to have a partnership with Cornerstone Counseling Center. Chris Albini, who's here tonight, with a couple of members of his team, provide direct insurance-based counseling services through our schools. So it's the opportunity for the therapists to see the children in school where they're available, and then additionally, they partner with families outside of school during their normal business hours. Chris and his team have provided a number of in-service opportunities for our teachers and our families, including especially during the COVID pandemic, some self-care opportunities, really teaching our staff about how to take care of ourselves. And has run some summer programs for us, and it's really been a wonderful partnership. This partnership can be through either the intake coordinator, the phone number that you see there, or through any of our mental health providers that we already talked about. They, would help to schedule that intake, and typically, we get an intake within the week or so, and to be able to provide services. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the people who actually work within our buildings. These are the people, the pictures, and the reason why I incorporate these pictures is so that you can see who are the people that your children are meeting with and talking to and spending time with. And this will be available on our website, we hope, as well, so that you can, kind of put a face to the name as you connect with our staff. Anybody have questions about how our school-based services work? I think it's important to recognize that while these are the individual providers, our school provides comprehensive social emotional learning for all of our kids. And so we have a social emotional program for every school in which we're really teaching kids those skills for self-regulation, for conflict resolution, for being able to build those social relationships. And we do that teaching for every child. And then these additional services or for when those services may not be enough.
Maybe just go into the coordination of services, when there's outside services and inside services, and how powerful that can be.
Yep. Our mental, so our school psychologists, social workers, and school counselors really are the point people for our schools. And because again, especially at the secondary level, your child may have 5, 6, 7, 8 teachers within a school year. And so our mental health staff do a lot of that care coordination. So the objective really is to be able to work and communicate directly with those mental health providers within the community so that everybody's working on the same page. So that schools and families, we call it the healthy triangle. Schools, families, and community-based partners are all working together. And when we see everybody on the same page doing the same thing, that is really when we see our kids make really significant improvements. We did have a number of our staff here today, so if anybody would like to ask questions, or as we gather informally, you want to stop and just ask any questions about any of our schools, we're glad to answer them. Thanks again for participating in this.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Chris and Jess. Any final comments or anything before we kind of close out the presentation piece and move into more of a casual conversation offline? We'll be closing down our online virtual portion of the program.
Just wanted to say thank you again for having us. We recognize that we can't speak enough to how much hard work this community, the school, the parents, the caregivers have put into the well-being of the kids here, and for us to be a part of it tonight means a lot. So thank you, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank our coalition members that are here tonight. We appreciate, we wouldn't be a coalition without the community support, and we do have coalition members here with us tonight. So thank you for coming out to support this important program. And as we said earlier when we opened, this is a topic that will continue to hopefully provide resources and information and additional forums as we get into the next school year. So we really appreciate your feedback tonight as you go home and think about this, or kind of process the information you heard tonight. Continue to please share that feedback with us so we can really tailor these programs to best meet your needs going forward. We do need to work together. And we'll continue to do that. So I invite everybody to please help yourselves to refreshments, hang out and chat and meet some of the in-house folks that are here tonight with us. And I thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.